I'm Kimberly with the Fat Quarter Shop, and we're here with Carrie Nelson from Moda Fabrics, and they have an awesome new product called Cake Mix Recipes. And today, Carrie's going to show us recipe number 4. So Carrie, tell me about the cake mix.
The cake mix papers are designed to be used with Moda 10-inch by 10-inch layer cakes. They are triangle papers that come with some block ideas, so everything is self-contained, and they make half triangle squares. Each pad comes with, on the inside cover, it's got some basic baking techniques that includes you do not want to starch or size or pre-wash your layer cake squares. If you normally do that, you don't want to do them for this. You just want to take them out of the package and use them just right the way they are. It's going to come with blocks, a couple of simple settings, and sizes of what things would be depending on what you did, using different sizes of sashings and layouts. This particular paper, recipe number 4, has 2 sizes, or make that you can cut them, trim them down to 2 sizes. That's why it's an X for the stitching. You can trim it down to a 4 by 4 inch finish size or to a 3 3/4 inch finish size. Did that for 2 reasons. One, just in case you feel like you have a little bit tight, and sometimes for some blocks and some size quilts, that little 1 inch smaller block can make a difference between a nice throw quilt or for a bed as opposed to a really big quilt. So each pad has 45 sheets. That gives you a couple of extras plus enough for the 42 squares in the layer cakes.
So let's see how we lay these out.
You're going to layer the fabrics right sides together with the light square on the top. We'll talk in a little bit about why you're going to do it that way, but you need to line them up pretty evenly. You're going to do the same with your paper, and you're going to pin it in place in a couple of places. You want to make sure you do not pin on the dotted lines because those are your stitching lines. This one, it is important to go ahead and pin it down because it will shift as you're putting it through the machine, and you do not have a ton of clearance on this, so you need to kind of keep the paper pretty secure. For stitching it, you're going to use a little bit shorter stitch length than you normally use, 12 to 14 stitches to the inch. I love using the Aurifil 50 weight thread. I do all of my stitching with kind of this golden tan color, but for today, so that the stitching shows, we're going to use this really pretty red.
So let's go to the sewing machine.
Okay, you're going to start stitching where the star, right where it says start. You're going to follow the numbers and the arrows. You're going to stitch towards the center, down, around. That will let you stitch a continuous line. If you'd like to stitch all the way across and back, you can do that, but you won't be able to do it continuously. As you're stitching, it is important to stay on the line as closely as possible. You do not want to be stitched too far inside or outside. If you go off just a little bit, that's okay, as long as it's not for a really long stretch or that it's too far off. If it is, you'll want to go back and re-stitch that. If it's in the seam allowance, you don't need to take the stitches out. If you've stitched it that you've got a wider seam allowance, you are going to want to open that up a little bit. All right. What you do at your corners is less important because that's going to be cut as you're trimming apart the squares.
So show me some cutting tips.
For the cutting, the first thing you're going to want to do on this is cut the outside edge, and you're going to want to put your glasses on if you need them. Depending on which size you're going to cut, that's the line that you're going to want to stay with, that you cut. You're always cutting a square. You can cut all 2 of the lines at the same time. It depends on your ruler and how comfortable you are and the height of it. I tend to cut 2 at a time. It's probably because I'm lazy that way. Use the crosswise lines on your ruler to help you line things up. Then you can either cut diagonally or cut it into squares. I find it a little easier to cut these into squares first, but everybody has a different preference. And yes, well, you could try to line those up if you wanted to. I find it easier just to stack them and cut. And then this line is a little bit less important that it be super accurate, mostly because it's your seam allowance and you've already pieced this to size, so you don't have to worry about it being quite as exact, except that it's a really good place to practice your placement and to get it as even as possible. You've now got 8 half triangle squares that are all going to finish. These were trimmed to finish at 4 inches by 4 inches. If you cut the inside line, that would be 3 3/4 inches finished.
So let's go iron.
Now it comes time to press the half triangle squares. This is why you're going to have your light fabric on the top. You're going to be able to press with the paper still on. You can remove it if that's what you really like to do, but for larger half triangle squares, the benefit of leaving the paper on is it gives you stability, and it's a little harder to distort that center seam. For pressing these, I like to press 4 at a time. Partly it lets me count, but it also reinforces the pressing underneath because I'm still using the heat to go over it. And then at the very end, I can hit it with a little bit of steam to really set it, which I then turn off. Now comes time to remove the paper. What you're going to do is put your fingernail right on the seam, and you're just going to tear up and use your fingernail to sweep away the piece of paper that's in the seam. And you're going to put this paper over there. They go pretty quickly. Yes, you always have 1 or 2 that they want to come apart, but you'd rather your paper come apart easily than to really have to tear it. You're going to do that, and then you're going to trim off your little points. Absolutely, you are going to do that.
So Carrie, show me your block possibilities.
There are a lot, but here are a few just to get you started.
Carrie, tell me about these 2 quilts.
These 2 quilts were made to show that you don't need an entire layer cake to make a quilt. These 2 were made with a single pad, a single print layer cake, and a single solid layer cake. Each one used 21 grids. One is made with some of the blocks that are in the pad, and the other, they were just laid out in kind of a continuous of one of the blocks that is also a possibility. So it's 2 quilts that are perfect for kids, nice little throw size, 2 quilts, 1 layer cake.
Awesome, so let's look at her next quilt. So as you can see, Carrie has given us so many possibilities with our cake mix recipes. Tell me about this quilt.
This is a classic traditional sampler quilt in that there are 16 different blocks. It is 1 Maven layer cake, grunge squares cut to 10 inches, sashing on 2 sides just to give it a little bounce, straight rows. That's all there is to it. It is a classic sampler quilt.
It's so amazing. Make sure to check out all of Carrie's other videos about her cake mixes on the Fat Quarter Shop YouTube channel, and like, comment, and subscribe. See you next time.